Hey everybody, welcome to Monday Night Live in Lexington, you guys. My name is Catherine Kaufman, and I'm a psychic medium here in Lexington, Kentucky. And this is my every Monday night live show, Monday Night Live in Lexington. And tonight we have back our surprise special guest, Shifu Karega. We have an ongoing show kind of on the electric universe and a lot of the theories that are surrounding that. So tonight we're going to go over Giza power plant and Atlantis theory.
Right.
So those of you that are on my professional page, I did leave a link on there so that you can hop over to the personal page and chat if you want. I will try to catch all the questions as they go by because Facebook has changed something on this live feed, and it goes by so fast that I can't really catch all the comments, but I will try my best. So let's do a couple shout outs. Hey to Paige Denise and Julie and Melissa, Jim Fozzie, Susan, Paul Manning, Kyla, Jenny Klein, and a special shout out to Brenda Isaacs on my professional page on the TV channel. And then over here on Instagram, hey to Jean Ferris Winery. Thanks for joining us this evening. And Erica Page. If you have any questions on Instagram, type them in the comments. We will try to catch those as they go by as well.
And hey to my kids.
Yes. And hey to Veronica Kennard. So let's find out, and a lot of people don't even know what the Giza power plant is.
Oh, okay. Well, let's take 1 second to step back and talk about why we're talking about this. With
why are we talking about it? Indeed.
Remember, electric universe cosmology is different because for it to work, there's an entire litmus test. Things have to fit the Occam's razor. They have to be the simplest explanation, which would, in our case, the evidence for the electric universe is primarily in the sun, secondarily in the stars, but there is a large amount of historical data. And when we talk about the historical data, we can no longer call it myth in a derisive kind of looking down on it kind of way, but as the origins of mankind, because the stories repeat around the world.
Right.
And so
but that's what makes it a little bit more validating.
It does.
Is independent societies are coming up with these explanations.
That's right. That's right.
A part of each other, and so you got to look at that as a total.
That's right. And the evidence for an Atlantean or pre-Younger Dryas civilization seems to be growing. Of course, right now we stop with Göbekli Tepe, which is just after Younger Dryas, but they seem to be pointing, at least this is Graham Hancock's theory, towards the inheritance of knowledge, perhaps a mystery school, an astronomical school, something that goes from before all of the first cataclysms. These are the early cataclysms, because we've talked about there's been a number of them. So we're going way back to the real Zep Tepe, not the age before Sumeria, but the age before the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, and in which there may have been an indeterminable length of period of time where biologically modern humans have existed from 250 to 250,000 years ago, and conscious modern humans who think like us, and they just as the same number of scam artists and geniuses and doctors and you know, just like us, have been around for 40,000 years, which means that based on evidence in cave paintings and these are theories, again, these are a lot of Graham Hancock, but you can go and look up the research. Certainly there's no reason why biologically modern humans for 200,000 years would not be capable of, after 160,000 years, forming some type of society or civilization. Now that mystery school perhaps the Bosnian pyramids are the start, at least in that region of the world.
I was looking at those. They're
Right.
huge.
They are huge.
They're how much bigger are they than the Egyptian pyramids?
Well, because it's a mountain that has been shaped into a pyramid, they're quite a bit bigger, but they're not as impressive because they're not machines. These are, from what we can tell, worship centers. The cultures at that time had a predilection for going underground and painting. And what we found in the Bosnian pyramids is that the tunnels are all sealed off. So they sealed them off for a reason. Perhaps the age changed. One of my theories about the Göbekli Tepe is why would they bury these temples? Perhaps they just as the age changed. So like we're ending Pisces, in Aquarius, you know. So if we were Göbekli Tepe, perhaps we would just bury that temple and build a new one, which seems to be what they were doing. And that being the beginnings of the mystery school, and if Graham Hancock's correct, the consumption of psychedelics, changing our consciousness, it's not too much of a stretch to imagine that within the next 24,000 years that you would get pretty advanced and you could come up with something as advanced as a power plant at Giza.
Right.
What we know for sure is that Giza was not made with chiseling. It was not hand done. It was not made with slaves.
It's machined.
It was machined. And I just attended Chris Dunn. So Chris Dunn came to the AKHA yesterday in Louisville, and he spoke and he presented some really excellent evidence that quite easily disproves any idea of hand carving or an army of artisans, because there's no way that you would get the consistency that he sees. And he was basically taking these pictures and putting them into CAD and looking at the symmetries, and he also gave proof of when they had machining accidents. So the question becomes, well, how did they run these machines? Still, the old-fashioned idea of them turning hand cranks and stuff comes up. It's not very likely when you talk about granite and you talk about basalt and you talk about limestone.
Yes, because I was looking at some of the technical stuff about the Giza power plant, and they were coated with limestone and had granite-lined shafts.
Right. Now, some people think that they were molded. There's not a whole lot of evidence for that advanced a chemistry. What he's proposing is a much simpler chemistry involving hydrochloric acid and ions. And then essentially the way it would work is that because it's in ratio with the Earth and it's located at the center of the landmass of the Earth, map-wise, and it has all those special alignments that are so famous, certainly covered a ton in Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock and other people, Robert Bivall, and it's just so many people have talked about how perfect the pyramids are, unreasonably so for a tomb.
But don't you think that that's why they attract so much attention?
Well, they do, because
that
mystery.
is,
Why would you do that unless, you know, again, although they didn't have a stock market, certainly they would have needed a return on their investment culturally and energetically. So those being at just the right ratios with the Earth and using things like Fibonacci and golden ratio, getting in resonance with the natural vibration of the tectonic plates. And then that vibration would cause something called piezoelectricity.
Right.
So
which we see in nature.
Right. Actually, there was just an event, you guys can look this up, in 2014 in Arkansas. There were some earthquakes that caused piezoelectric shock waves that killed a lot of birds. So birds were just crashing out. Lots of different types of birds.
There's some kind of shrimp that has, that when they strike with their tail creates that effect, and it creates a vacuum and a light underwater.
That's really fascinating. I'd like to see that. There's a lot of interesting there's a lot of really interesting effects, and hopefully next time I'll be able to do some superconducting here. But piezoelectricity is basically just the excitation of quartz crystals and then the conduction of electrons. And so then when you introduce all these complex processes and you have resonance, and then you baffle it in just the right way, you create a standing wave. And you end up with one of the channels is it gets filled with the acid, and then there's electrodes that go into it, and that's what I don't want to ruin the door plugs have two little electrodes coming off. They would dip into the acid, and then you'd be able to pull some electricity. But the more interesting idea is that the resonance compressing the gases and moving it up the shafts and creating basically plasma energy.
Yes,
So
because the
somehow they knew about
shafts, they
plasma.
don't, the shafts aren't really delineated for any purpose. I mean, there's no clear purpose for
Yeah, there
these
was
shafts in the
there was
pyramid.
an arbitrary theory that they were pointing towards Regulus and other stars, but remember that from all the research and what the Egyptians say, the orbit of this planet has changed, the tilt has changed, and certainly we've proven that with just the type of plant material left in woolly mammoth bellies is not available at those latitudes anymore. And even the possibility of the polar shift actually changed which one was north and which one was south. So that's very unlikely. It would certainly point to a star, but there's no proof that it would point to that star or this star. That's just a theory that was used. So why would anybody go to that length of cutting? When they cut those shafts, they did so in a way that was unreasonably difficult for
I can't even
any
imagine.
return on investment. Also, if they were looking at stars which are round, why would they make square shafts? So it seems much more likely they have an actual true function, and they seem to be for moving standing waves and creating basically extremely elongated Crookes tubes.
I think the only way that we're really going to discover the exact function is to create a replica and then experiment
They've been
on
doing
different resonant frequencies and electricity with that. What was
really exciting is that there was 2 presenters yesterday, and the other one, I can't reveal all of his work because he's actually getting patents out of this power plant.
That's cool.
Yeah, and he is working at a major manufacturing company in Indianapolis, and he's actually helping with the void and everything. He's working with Chris and working on this because it's certainly something that could be useful. Yeah. It's funny. It's one of the attendees to the meeting yesterday kept bringing up about the heat. But I want to remind people that when you have plasma, number one, it sheathes itself, and it forms like a little layer. And number two, like a fluorescent light, it may be thousands of degrees inside the current, but on the outside it's not very hot at all. And so, so the granite would have no hard time dissipating that heat. So it's just a matter of how is it capped on the end. Obviously, at some point, how did it surge and explode? Because there's evidence of an explosion inside the king's chamber. Who moved the sarcophagus? Because it used to be between the shafts, and it was an amplifying device. And other than that, it's coming out pretty well. I mean, the physics and the math is there, and the fact that somebody's using it now to create technologies and for industrial use. And this is very recent. It's actually kind of a funny story. He met this man in August. I met him in June, and I said, I want to talk about plasma. And he said, he handed me this book and signed it, and he said, read this and tell me if you still want to talk about plasma. And I said, I told him recently, I said, I read it, and now I still want to talk about plasma, and so does he. Now he didn't understand plasma, so that's why this other guy. So it's funny because I met him in June and then he met this guy in August.
That's
so
pretty good.
Clearly, everything's coming together. And this man's theory looks to me to be correct. I had the same basic idea about why there's a void and what its function will be.
It's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out.
I'll just use one word.
Some other shout outs here.
Amplifier.
Yes, an amplifier.
Amplifier.
I just want to make sure there's no questions. A special shout out to Arwen and the kids.
Yeah.
And let's see, Susan Ryan, Beth Ann, Stormy, Diana James, hey to Beth Ann Brown, Lee Park, Lyric, Kathy, Sherry, Melissa Cook. A special shout out to Wes Ruiz. And much love, kisses. Thanks for all the hearts and the likes and the kisses. Let's see, Ina, Rob, Kimberly, Steve, Thea, and Julia. If you guys enjoy these Monday night episodes, hit that share button right now and click that screen and share this with your friends. I do appreciate it. So let's go on with.
Let's talk about Atlantis then.
Okay, that's my favorite topic.
Right. So. The evidence arising from Atlantis is, it's worldwide. It's the Peruvian stones and how they interlock and why those look so similar to layouts at Abu Rawash, and they're finding all these land masses underneath the water. They don't want to admit that there could be one for Atlantis itself, but they will admit Doggerland, Sons of Land, Mauritius, Beringia,
but Atlantis.
Right. They'll admit, but so essentially we know now Dwarka. They collapsed, and when they went under, basically overnight, they changed the entire landscape, and apparently must have created a large tsunami which wiped away a lot of the evidence, right? So this is pre-deluge, right? This is the beginnings of the problem. Perhaps it was the moon. Remember, we don't know exactly what body. We're just speculating that it was the entrance of Janus, the two-faced god, or Nibiru is another way that name is. So something changed the crustal alignments, and a lot went under, but not Giza. And it certainly stood there for a time. We don't know when, though. It was pre-dynastic. And then at some point, Sumerian-like cultures, as they expanded, they came back to Egypt and found these texts, or maybe they'd had them with them and brought them with them, and then they created a whole cult around the gods.
It's hard to say.
Right, it is hard to say. So they had memories of the celestial events, and they certainly had memories of the technology, but what they couldn't do was replicate it to the same degree. And so we see two dichotomies. One is the oldest stuff seems to be the best, and then the youngest stuff is not of the same quality, and it certainly seems to get worse as you go. And another thing is that the older stuff seems to be technologically driven for a purpose of perhaps an industrial purpose. And later on, it's more religious. But they certainly, instead of breaking into the pyramids and making them into tombs, they built the Valley of the Kings and temples at Luxor, etc. And then
thank goodness
they did things.
They didn't.
I know, right?
Do the other.
Well, but they respected they respect them as the gods, just as the Inca respected the Kukulkan and all these fish suit bearded men that came from the ocean. Now, who came from the ocean and why? Of course, we all speculate they were fleeing from the Atlantis disaster. And certainly the legend is that after building all the things in South America and Central America, they went back into the ocean. Is that literal? I don't know. But I will say this, certainly we need to explain how the crustal collapse happened. So that introduces us to, there's another electrical connection via a channel named Distinti, a guy who goes by Distinti. He put out a video about this mechanism, and it's related to the expanding Earth. So I want to talk about the expanding Earth for a brief second. And
okay, we have a question here.
Yeah, sure.
Susan wants to know, do you think that they harvested something or collected from the selected areas when building the pyramids and other areas? Minerals that are or was present in those certain locations, any evidence of this?
Yes, so one of the things that Chris Dunn went over yesterday was about the big saws that they use to cut, and there are these pits right next to the mega structures. These are 30-some foot saws, and what they found is not only ferrous material, so rust, but they also found ruthenium, and ruthenium is not local. So he said one great source is Russia. And ruthenium is used for high temperature. It has a high melting point, more than 4,000 degrees, and it's used for machining. And when this other man, Eric Wilson, mentioned that to his colleagues in the industry, all their faces lit up, and they were like, wow, I'm on this now. So he's got a whole bunch of people looking at this stuff because no one in the antiquities world, like Stonehenge or something, you're not going to find ruthenium. It's just not that common a metal.
Not
so how
in
would
that
they know?
Area.
How would they know about that mineral or that element, and how to alloy it? Because it was alloyed with the saw, right? So that right there, that indicates a long time of working in forges.
Right.
So again, that's why I argue that we could use that 36,000 to 12,000 years to prove that. All right, so the expanding Earth.
We're using a grapefruit and orange.
What we start with is the basic curvature. So if you imagine this is the crust of the Earth, And then as you grow, of course, it can flex a little bit, but pretty much the crust of the Earth is actually rather hard. It's very thin, though. It's thin like a fingernail.
It is very thin, thinner than
right.
what we were taught when we were kids in
right.
school.
It's very thin. And it's getting thinner in certain places, like Death Valley eventually will actually open up into the mantle because it's being pulled apart in the Rift Valley in Africa, same thing.
I'd sell my house if I were you.
Africa, no, it's thousands of years. But Africa is going to eventually have ocean go right up the middle of it because it's splitting. So now when you have this crust and it kind of deforms a little bit, it can wobble and it can certainly slide around on top of a liquid mantle. But it's not going to change its shape over readily. Now imagine, this is all for exaggeration as far as the curvature is concerned, right? Yeah. So you don't need this much difference in curvature, but at some point you end up with a difference in the radius of the Earth, and you end up with areas where the crust is bowed. Now the evidence for this, Discenti pointed out, is that there's not just a hot spot at Hawaii and at Yellowstone, but there's a hot spot in the center of every continental plate, every one of them. Including one I just learned about under Japan. So even the smaller plates that are between large plates have these hot spots. And some are larger than hot spots than others, but still they're there. So what happens is you have all this this heat coming up the center, and there's a convection that is electrically driven convection, as Distinti points out. If you want to know more, go to again Distinti's channel, DISTINTI, and he points out that eventually what that's going to do is, because of water coming in and heat circulating, it's going to change the properties, and there's going to be parallel cracks that form. And eventually, just at some point, the weight of it just
collapse.
Just goes down.
That's what we were talking about, crustal collapse.
Yes,
crustal and the expanding Earth.
Right, so as the Earth expands, eventually after a time, there's these extra gaps. They get hot underneath, and it's just all the water vapor and everything changing, cracking, then suddenly there's a collapse. Now, could that have been triggered by something coming along? Just the same as sometimes a small earthquake triggers a landslide. The landslide then creates the tsunami. So you can have a chain of events, and certainly that could be, it could be the introduction of some other large body that causes, or it could have been its own thing. This could have happened all by itself, and it's just one of several of the cataclysms, because we know there's at least 6 of these cataclysms, if not more. So we're at the point where we just don't know enough.
Yeah.
But we certainly know that there are these places that are under the water that they found. Zealandia is one of the more interesting. It's big. It's even bigger, as far as I can tell, than Sundaland. And the Easter Islanders have long said that their island is the last of what remains of a much larger continent. And that's even further east than Zealandia.
Yeah.
So there might have been a Pacifica as well.
What's the name of the landmass found off of India?
Well, there's the Dwarka and the Lemuria, but the down in the Mauritius Islands, they found the remains certainly of one there. But I would contend that that might have actually been the upper peaks of something much larger, because the Lemurian legend is that it goes all the way from Sri Lanka all the way to Madagascar. So that would be obviously a very large amount of land to suddenly lose. But again, as far as the crust is concerned, not very much. It's very
so thin.
Do you think that
they were
take
part of this crustal collapse then? Atlantis.
You think that it caused it? No, I think that
Lemuria?
humans tend to blame. We tend to blame ourselves. The same thing happened in the deluge, and the same thing happened in the Venus or Exodus cataclysms. We blame humans. We blame the evil humans and the evil animals. But there's no proof that we were mining. I don't have anything for you guys in terms of like they were mining some special material and they were flying about with it like the Kryptonian. No, is our story of Krypton and Superman, is that a soul memory? Are we so interested in Superman because of that? Did we do something?
I mean, that's a possibility, because if you look back at a lot of the science fiction shows of our early century, some of the stuff that came from people's imaginations are now becoming a reality.
That's true.
And so you have to say, is this DNA memory?
It could be. Velikovsky certainly would argue that at least we feel guilty. You know, we argued in a previous episode that possibly we feel like abused children are abused by the gods. So I don't honestly know the answer I'm just going to present
So you
the
have
evidence
another
for the
question.
partial collapse. Go ahead.
Susan wants to know, California has an area that the Earth crust juts up and out. Would that be caused from a collapsed area of this crustal collapse?
I'm assuming that Susan is not referring to the normal the translation. There must be a different region that she's referring to. So I need to see. And there are only 6 or 7 on the Richter, and you can see the land change by 8 feet easily.
Yes.
So, you know, imagine something of the scale that we're talking about. If you have a few thousand feet, when that falls, I mean, I don't know if people saw on Netflix, there's a Swedish video, it's an amazingly made movie called The Wave, and it's all about an actual landslide that will happen. I'm 100% promise it will happen. They monitor for it. But the movie is based on it if it did happen.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful movie, don't want to ruin it for you, but it's not that much land when you think about it overall, and the size of the wave that it is generating.
Is this on YouTube that people can view that? Or
no, it's on Netflix.
Netflix.
Yeah, it's called The Wave. It's a wonderful movie. It's a family movie. So
let me do a couple
scary,
more
though.
shout outs.
I don't mean family, watch it with your kids.
Don't watch
it's about
it with
family.
Kids. Hey to Carrie, Regina, Debbie, Yasmin, Tim, and Tom Driver and Samantha Ward. Thanks for joining us tonight. Let me make sure there's no questions over here on Instagram. Hey to Talk Ghost and Paradise, and it looks like Mark. Thanks for joining us this evening. If you guys are enjoying this broadcast, hit the share button and share this with your friends. I think you just tap the screen and it will share. Thanks for joining us, and so let's continue on.
Sure. Well, I just wanted to mention about, you know, we've been talking about the galactic shift, and we've been talking about changes in the electric circuit. And I mentioned earlier to you, I've been noticing with my patients a drop in their motivation, energy, their metabolism,
Everybody's
their sexual
getting
energy.
depressed right now and are like at the bottom of their energy. Why is that?
I feel that there's evidence. Of course, I've made it very clear to people that there's going to be more killing chi this winter than usual, and I'm sorry if anybody has lost or is experiencing grief right now, but it's been very common. There has been a change in the electrical nature. Now, over at Suspicious Observers, Ben Davidson has been mentioning the magnetic shift. He has a series called Where Are We Going? And it's about us moving out of the dust, behind the dust cloud, and getting into the area where we can actually face the galactic center. So this is the age of Aquarius shift. So as that galactic energy is getting stronger on us, perhaps the sun's energy as we go into grand solar minimum is actually a synchronistic thing where the sun is going into a Maunder minimum of a sort, because the galactic circuit is increasing its flow. And perhaps the Earth's magnetosphere is getting weaker because it certainly is degrading because the sun's also coming down. So the entire circuitry might be changing.
I wanted to ask you a question though. And I'm going to get back to the Giza power plant. I wanted to know, where's the power derived from? Is it lunar, solar? Is it derived from the ionosphere?
You mean for what, the Earth?
For the power plant.
Well, in that case, remember, it was the resonance of the Earth.
So it's the Earth's vibration.
Right, but the Earth's vibration, now we are learning that, again, back to Suspicious Observers. In fact, he just came out with a video today. NASA has launched their own team to talk about electric sun-driven earthquakes. So since we've been making these series, NASA has totally changed their position. They've published a paper about Birkeland currents, and they don't call them that.
Well, interesting.
Very interesting, right? And now they're talking about, they have a whole team that's going to be dedicated to trying to predict earthquakes by looking at coronal holes. So there is a connection electrically, and the Earth is itself a dynamic capacitor transformer.
So here's another question.
And so it vibrates. That's where the energy is coming from.
Well, when we were talking about our grapefruit and orange thing, and the energy that builds up under there.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that maybe the buildup of energy was the resonance of that was something that powered the power plant?
Yeah, that's exactly. So the energy first came from the sun to the Earth, and the Earth is vibrating, and then it generated and put it into the the quartz,
Into
and the
those.
quartz created piezoelectric static charge, which was then transferred to the acids and to compress the gas. And then as it compressed the gas, it vibrated at a frequency. You can see standing wave frequency burn marks, vitrification in the Queen's Chamber, which is the long chamber, I'm sorry, the Grand Gallery. And in there, you can see where it's been compressing at a certain rate and creating a big long tube. And then they must have had a way of capping it at the end and capturing that energy. Certainly the outside was conductive. Must have had a different conductivity.
I know
than the inside.
was reading about the capstone being made of gold.
It's possible, yeah. We never found the pyramidion, or the Bin Bin stone. But it is said legendarily that the Bin Bin stone came from the gods, and they came as a star, and then conferred certain powers. I mean, these are all very interesting.
Sorry to get you
Egyptian
off your
legends.
topic,
but
but
they're
I
all
wanted
related.
to understand exactly where this energy
Well, they're all related, because as the electric circuit changed, or perhaps one of the cataclysms, or maybe just a very large earthquake must have changed the circuitry. That's what caused the blow up at the power plant. And so then they tried to fix it. By the way, there's evidence of them trying to engineer solutions to fix their power plant and get it back online. But it's obvious that at some point they gave up, and they no longer even followed making these. They probably had built a few of them. Perhaps the different pyramids were each, maybe the other two are broken inside, and so they just made bigger and bigger ones each time. At some point, though, they were wiped out. Now, were they wiped out by other humans who were jealous of their power? Maybe they lost their defenses. It's very difficult to know. But it's all related, and as our galactic shift is happening and the energy, the plasma is moving around, it might move around just like food does in the body in boluses. And so at some points, it appears that Saturn lost a large amount of charge and powered down, and then the sun, a few days later, received it and powered up and changed color. That's in the text as well, that we had a period of darkness and there was a change of stars.
Wes has a comment. He's saying the sunspots have been decreasing.
That's right.
Is that true?
Yes, that's true. So there's already an 11-year cycle of sunspots, and the peak of the 11-year cycle, the last time we had a peak of the sunspots, it was weaker than the previous 11-year cycle that they had been in their peak. And we're now at the ebb of that, and it's also decreasing. We may get even less sunspots the next 11-year cycle that happens. But the sun is definitely, NASA has switched positions. There was a big hubbub. It went out to major media outlets about the sun shutting down perhaps by 2050, but it's actually already here. So will we experience the same chill down that they had in the 1500s? Maybe. We don't know. Will it be even more of a chill down? We don't know.
Well,
because we
quite opposite than global warming.
It is. All the indicators of that. Well, it's just like the stock market. Everybody always freaks out when it's going up or down, but by the time most people look, it's actually about to flip.
Right.
And so a lot of people were jumping into Bitcoin or the stock market just as it was peaking. And the same thing here. The temperatures are peaking because they're going to drop. Now, how quick are they going to drop? I don't know if they're going to drop Younger Dryas style, or if they're going to come down like 5 degrees a decade or something. I don't honestly have an answer for that. All I know is that there is change happening. We have to expect that change and kind of adjust for it. It could be exciting change, though, and we don't want to focus too much on how Atlantis ended and all this negativity, because actually the fact that we are talking about plasma and we have the ability to do something with it is different. I was thinking about this morning. If there was a mega tsunami today, what would I do? I would I'd take my family in the car and I'd go to either Black Mountain or West Virginia, because I'd be like a mile high up altitude-wise. It'd be higher than any mega tsunami that I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. Well, ARC and CAR both have ARC, CAR. You know what I mean? You don't have to be defined by, now if you're right on the coast and the tsunami hits, what can you do? But nothing. But humanity's going to experience this differently than before, and it's probably going to drive us together rather than apart. Hopefully. And certainly there's evidence that we will be able to harness the solar wind at some point. We'll be able to transfer that to way stations on different planets. We'll be able to terraform Mars. Who knows? We might even be able to create magnetic tunnel of our own and siphon the atmosphere back from Venus to Mars where it came from, right? Because Venus has way too much carbon dioxide.
If we could put just as much energy into that as we do fighting with each other, we would already be done.
I mean, and you know, even people, they say things like, well, we're running out of resources. No, we're running out of surface. What we've got to do is robotic deep crust manufacturing and mining. And we've got the robots. Let's put them to work doing that. Not put people at risk, but go down 2,000 feet and actually start gathering all these extra, because whatever's on the surface, we're going to see that throughout the crust. So if we need more ruthenium, if we need more titanium, let's go get it. There's asteroids out there that have tons of platinum and titanium. There's not a lack of energy, people, and there never was. Even among the standard green technologies, there's plenty of energy. And then what I'm talking about, there's more than enough for trillion people, let alone 8 billion of us. We've got to start treating each other better. As far as I'm concerned.
We're already over.
I know.
Time goes by too quick when you're
briefly mention these 2 books.
Yes, go right ahead.
People look for The Electric Sky. And
show it to Instagram.
And it's on. Don't get the one on Amazon. It's like $50. Look on the Electric Universe Gateway and go to Stickman Stone and pick this guy up. And
so we need to leave a link on the comments for the electric.
And then I've been also reading about Li Qingyun, who was a confirmed, officially documented 250-year-old man. And you'd be surprised how he did not he didn't try extra hard to be like that. So he must have tapped into some natural technology. And hopefully after we do, because next episode we're going to be doing King Arthur.
Yes.
Right? I know. People didn't expect that, did they?
Oh, no.
But after that, then hopefully we're able to get and do some of the Chinese technology.
That would be a lot of fun.
I know we haven't done that. We probably need to.
So let's find out now, David. What's for dinner, David?
Well, David's a little lacking tonight. I had some surprise visitors, my mom and dad. So I want to do an impromptu, delicious grilled cheese sandwich.
Oh, yay!
Fancy grilled cheese sandwich.
All
so
right.
not just plain American cheese. We're going to throw some pimento cheese in there and a few little tidbits and stuff. So
excellent.
Okay, so those of you that watched last Monday night live in Lexington, where I did part 1 of vocation and soul purpose, next Monday is going to be part 2. Stay tuned for that. And then we're going to get this guy back for some more of the new theory on King Arthur.
That's right.
I can't wait for that.
It's right in front of everyone's faces. And
I know. I can't wait.
At some point, we never got through it because I was sick. We never got through the Bonza, the Chinese astrology.
I know, but happy Chinese New Year,
happy
guys.
Chinese New Year.
So we're going to sign out. You guys have a fabulous week.
Thank you.
Kisses from Kentucky. And I will see you next Monday. So we're going to shut down.